everyone. Lars Ulrich hitting you here via Zoom, the Zoom party. Thank you for joining the Mill Valley Film Festival number 43. And thank you for watching The Sound of Metal. Thank you for supporting The Sound of Metal. And when Mark and I and Maureen and the rest of the gang talked about my participation in this year's event, I'm hard-pressed to think of a more obvious film for me to host and to moderate the Q&A in this particular film. There was a little of this and a little of that, and lots of great stuff in there. And some of you may know that some of those things are a part of my day job. So let's jump straight into it. We have 4 people from the film here, from all parts of America checking in via Zoom. Writer, director Darius checking in from the East Coast, right?
Indeed.
Nice to see you. And Riz, lead actor, obviously, down in LA. And we have Chelsea and Shaheem. Chelsea is in Colorado, and Shaheem is also in LA. And I am just on the other side of the bridge up here in NorCal. So let's jump into it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you.
Likewise,
Darius, you and I have a mutual friend in Derek Cianfrance, who obviously you guys wrote The Place Beyond the Pines together. Like I said before, I know Derek. I've actually done a couple Q&As with him, and I know he's a big metal fan. And so on. Tell me about what's the nature of your guys' relationship, and how did you guys develop the story?
Well, Derek, I mean, it's a wonderful coincidence, Lars. And, you and I met years ago with Derek when we came to your premiere. And so for me, having you moderate this discussion is just off, it couldn't be better. And, and I know Derek would feel the same way. And so Derek and I go back a long time. Actually, when he got an award to make Blue Valentine, before he made Blue Valentine, I was at that same luncheon getting up for a grant for a documentary I was making. And then our kids ended up in the same school together. And the very first time we spoke, we actually just spoke a couple days about this. It was now 13 years ago that we first spoke, and the very first thing we talked about was this movie.
Okay.
And we connected immediately around this. Derek had been filming this band Jucifer. You know Jucifer? And it's a couple that lived kind of perpetually on the road. And Derek shot this gorgeous 16 millimeter.
Yeah, I was going to ask about this. Is the movie Metalhead, right?
Exactly. So this
what happened to that project? Okay. This became, because I was under the impression that was there maybe a documentary in there? Is that where it started?
Yeah, it basically, a long story, and a very long story, actually short.
We have nothing but time.
Derek started this film, and it was so beautiful and so lyrical, and it was a hybrid documentary that really was the nexus of Sound of Metal. And I was cutting it at that time, and I got really obsessed with it, and obsessed with this idea of sound perspective and narrative. And when it became clear that that movie was never going to get finished, Metalhead in its current form, and it wasn't the form that I felt the movie ultimately needed to be, even though it was gorgeous and inspired. And so I essentially adopted it and raised it as my own. I needed to write it. And so I wrote my own kind of take on that. And so that was really the baby that this became,
So you and Derek sort of had the big picture idea, and then you wrote the screenplay by yourself, or was he involved in it too?
No, he wasn't involved in the script, actually. I started the script for a number of years, and then I involved my brother, Abraham, who's also a musician, and we worked on the script for a long, long time, an embarrassingly long time. And it eventually became this. It had to go through a lot of iterations to become this.
It's such a specific world. I've never seen a film that really just takes place in the world that we see for these 2 hours. Is there any personal, have you had any personal experience, any members of your family or the community that you grew up in, or did any of this touch you personally, or did you just want to explore this whole world?
No, most of it is personal in one way or another. Certainly, I have a member of my family who went deaf. Actually, my grandmother went deaf early in her life, and she was a very marginalized woman. She was a lesbian living in New York, a Jewish lesbian, kind of an orphan. And she, when she went deaf, she was stuck between the deaf and the hearing world. And so she was kind of in between cultures. And that was very much alive for my brother and I when I was writing. And I also had a lot of, as Riz will tell you, much of this spirit of Ruben, I think, lives in me. And so I think a lot of things drew me to this film. And then one of the most intense addictions of anything is this kind of codependency in relationship that that really was at the heart of what kind of drew me to write this film. Actually, it was a very long 30-year relationship in my life probably one of the strongest addictions in this movie is codependency.
Sure.
And that was at play in the writing as well.
Tell me about casting Riz, and how did you know that he was the right actor for Ruben? What was that process when you were writing it? Were you envisioning Riz, or did you just write it and then get onto the casting as separate processes?
No, I think I've said to you before, Riz, that I think when I started writing this, Riz was like 7 years old.
Okay.
No,
so 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. I mean, it started 13 years ago when we first spoke about this. You were pretty young then, Riz. No, I didn't envision Riz at first, but interestingly, this film really needed a very, very brave actor. And it's, the interesting thing about needing a brave actor, everyone thinks they want to be a brave actor, but it requires that you're really scared. And this was a really scary process, I think, as Riz will attest. This was not a process with a safety net. This was not a process. This was a process that dared an actor not only to learn drums, but dared an actor to relinquish control, to relinquish hearing, to absolutely give into the spirit of this creative experience. And when I met you, Riz, it was like it was very clear to me when I met you that you were looking for experience. You weren't looking to be necessarily reiterating something you'd already done. You were looking for experience, you were looking to grow, and I already knew that you were immensely talented. So that wasn't in question. And so for me, it was just, we met and I knew, I told you as soon as I met you that I wanted you to do this role. I think with the very first time that we sat down together. And Lars, I just have to tell you a funny coincidence. The very first time that we sat down, by coincidence, we were in Los Angeles and Derek Cianfrance happened to be sitting 2 tables away. So, you remember that, Riz?
We just walked by. We were kind of talking. I think Derek's name had just come up, and I went,
"Oh, Derek.
Isn't that him?" Walked by and went, "Hey, guys. Hey." And he came and sat down for a moment. Yeah.
Checking up on you guys, making sure the chemistry was there. Riz, tell me about, your attraction to Ruben, such a deep, complicated character. Was it instant? Did you read it and it was just like, this is me? Or did you have to think about it? Did you have to do multiple read-throughs of the script? Tell me about that process.
Well, it's one of those scripts that you don't forget. And I wasn't aware of it at all. From what I understood, what I later learned was that it's a script that it was so well loved and had been kind of around for a number of years. As Darius said, he'd written it so long ago and been working on it for a long time. But for whatever reason, it's just a strange kind of alchemy of right person, right time, the right connection. It just hadn't been made. I knew nothing about it. My agent just sent it to me. I'd just done a couple of kind of bigger movies. I think I was in LA for a premiere of one of these kind of bigger movies that I'd done. And, as Darius said, I was very much hungry for a creative challenge, a new kind of experience, something that was daunting, something that was intimate and quite raw. And I read the script, it blew me away. I'm a very slow reader, ADD, all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, I just got through it, straight away. And you can tell, in a movie like Blue Valentine, what the quality of Darius's writing is. And so it blew me away. I didn't know what to expect. And when I sat down and met Darius, I just thought, well, okay, I was expecting some kind of like sage, yogic, kind of hermit to be floating on a cloud, having written this deeply profound and spiritual film. And what I found was someone as manic and untamed as me. And so we kind of like frothed at the mouth at each other, having kind of recognized a fellow animal and a kindred spirit, and kind of just like rough and tumbled verbally for an hour or two. And I think we just had an instant connection. I think we just both wear our hearts on our sleeve. And I think we both like just want to throw ourselves into things and see what happens. Although I should say that Darius kind of was an exemplar in that. I mean, I thought I was kind of game for a challenge, and I was certainly game for this one. But time and time again, it was kind of Darius, his kind of presence on set throughout preparation. I'm sure, Chelsea and Shaheem will attest to this as well. His presence was one that would allow you to take leaps of faith. And it's perhaps because he's sat with the story for so long, and because it's so personal, he knows it's so grounded in truth. And also just his energy, as you'll know, is one of kind of, in a way, of kind of faith and adventure. And, the coming together of those two things is kind of what, in the best case scenario, making a movie is. So he led us through that.
You had to learn both drumming and sign language for this, from what I understand, pretty much from scratch, right? Learning to play drums, I'm still 38, 45 years later, whatever, still trying to figure that out. You look so confident. Obviously, people like myself love to find the faults and, it's an overdub, that's not the take to the audio. I mean, obviously everything is spot on. You're playing, you're not only playing great, but you're also, obviously, it looks like it's the live takes or whatever. You're doing the sign language, the whole thing so, what it looks like so effortlessly. I mean, the prep work on this movie must have been insane. I mean, it must have been months and months and months. Tell me about that process, those processes.
It was a really long time. It was daunting at times. It was frustrating at times, but it was an absolute privilege, It's an absolute joy and privilege in this job, and to be able to learn something, to gain that new experience. Learning the drums really opened me up in new ways, and so did learning sign language. I think it opened me up physically in new ways. I think it allowed me to embody my own kind of self as a person, Riz, differently, communicating through drumming is probably the most primal way of communicating. To take that into my body, particularly as someone who works a lot with words, as a rapper, as someone who can be quite verbose, to kind of zip this up and to speak with your kind of, to speak rhythmically, that I think that shifted something for me personally, and that was a real gift. And Guy Licata, my drum teacher, just deserves a medal for his patience. Spent many hours sweating away in Brooklyn that summer. And then the 7 months alongside that of the ASL, I'm really indebted to Jeremy Stone, my Stein instructor and friend, who's also in the movie, for sharing his knowledge and his culture with me, to introducing me to his friends within the deaf community, and socializing me within that amazing community, and to been able to just spend some time within that community and make friends within that. It was just a real gift. So yes, like, it was not easy at times, and you always wish you could do better, but overall it was just such a gift and such a joy. So
did your rapping experience help you with the drumming? I mean, you were talking about the rhythmic elements of that. Had you never played drums before?
I'd never played drums, yeah. And after this film, I'll never play them again. Yeah, deeply scarred from that experience.
Well, listen, if you're leaving all of us with one performance, then this is an incredible one to be left with. Thank you.
Lars, you would appreciate this. You know, this really did come having never held a drumstick, and you know what you would appreciate, and normally we wouldn't necessarily geek out on this, but you know that process of getting the right and left hemispheres to start melding and speaking to each other. And Riz had to fight through that. And it was really amazing to watch that process happen also with ASL, because that's such a physical process, but drumming in particular,
right.
Riz had to work so hard to just get to the point of fighting through that kind of that stage of getting those two parts of the brain to work together. And then he also insisted on playing the double bass. So
yes.
Probably of all people, you could hear that in the recording. That was Riz just, you know, even though the way that I shot it was not with cutaways and showing off everything because that would indicate that we were faking it in some way, but you can hear it. And that's what Riz earned, you know, and insisted on. And that's what makes, you know, Riz kind of a next level. You say
it's incredible to watch. And also Riz being a lefty, you know, which is an unusual element. And can I just, before we turn it over to everybody else, one last question, Riz, you know, there's one thing that's so, that I admire about your performance and Ruben's, you know, Ruben's characters is like his resentments, his bitterness, his anger. Obviously, we don't get a lot of the backstory, so I know you probably had to reference your own version of a backstory. What did you channel to sort of have Ruben carry those resentments, that anger, and those frustrations through the whole movie?
You know, in a way, I guess, in the end, this movie is, and I guess all stories are about love in some way, right? Even if a character is kind of like scarred by their injuries and their traumas, they're not kind of wallowing in that. They're trying to get to love. They're trying to get to the other side of it. And I just figured that, and, you know, from our conversations with Darius and just spending time with Ruben, ultimately, this is someone who could stay afloat and get to the other side as long as he felt he had some use, you know, as long as he felt he had a use to Lou, a use in the band, a role to play in the world as a drummer. And when he felt that melted away, he lost his identity, he lost his kind of self-worth. And I guess, you know, in terms of like what we tap into, I guess Darius put so much of himself into this character. I thought it was only right for me to try and bring a lot of myself to it as well. And Darius was very encouraging about that. And I think he was encouraging to all of us. And, you know, Chelsea and Shaheem, you can attest to this, I'm sure, as well, of bringing ourselves to this. And so that's a big part of it. But Shaheem, jump in if you want to add to that.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, Chelsea and Shaheem, I mean, tell the audience a little bit about the community which worked on the film. I understand that there were a lot of people that were not professional actors, I guess would be the right reference. And so it was people from the community. Tell me about how both of you guys got involved and, you know, start with that.
Yeah. I was both involved. When I first met Riz, he was already fluid. And I can see why he is motivated. So the deaf community is like, wow, he's learning a lot of sign so fast. I thought he was already know sign language. Like when we were communicating in sign language, he was so fluent and understanding. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. He learned fast. I can see he's motivated. and for the community to come.
That's cool.
Chelsea,
Yeah.
Chelsea, do you feel that Darius and Riz captured the spirit of the community and the challenges, you know, in terms of the public perception?
Absolutely, I do, Lars. And the deaf community is really, in the film, the deaf community is one small part that's shown in the film. And there are so many communities within the larger deaf community. And this experience of Ruben is of a late deafened individual. And there's so many people who experience that in the world. They lose their hearing, and it's something that they knew once upon a time and oftentimes are not exposed to a signing community. And there's so many deaf folks' identities within the intersectionality of the larger community. Deaf folks, deaf blind folks, late deafened. Yes, absolutely. Darius and Riz caught those pieces. And just as Riz mentioned, Darius encouraged authenticity. My character's name is Jen, and Darius often said, let's talk about who you are and who Jen is. And I would often say, well, this is a part of me, if I can share it with you. And Darius said, that's exactly who Jen is. And so really the authenticity that Riz mentioned is what Darius encouraged from all of us.
Shaheem, back to you. What would you say, Shaheem, were the biggest challenges for Riz? Or was there a point where you felt that he became part of the community and was not simply an actor anymore?
I felt like he involved in the deaf community. Because, like I said, he felt like he was motivated. So when I met him, he was signing and everything. Yeah, it seemed like he's from the deaf community.
Okay.
If I could add
Go ahead,
to that,
Darius.
Lars?
Oh, go ahead. Chelsea, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I remember during one time on set, we were having lunch, and deaf folks always connected with each other, and Riz was never afraid to sit at the table with us. We had full conversations in American Sign Language. We said, see you later to the interpreters, and said, we're going to do this on our own. And that was really the best. I mean, like comedy and slang and all kinds of things that were said at the lunch table. And he just took the time to really honor us. And I know that Jeremy was working with Riz for a good year or so, and it's rare to see the commitment from a person who can hear. And just knowing that you and Jeremy spent all that time in New York, no actor has ever done that. So Riz, you are special to us in many more ways than you realize.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, there was
real privilege. I guess I just wish I'm just so rusty right now. I need another crash course to Jeremy so I can get back in there and start busting jokes with you guys. Right now, I just feel.
I have a video of that, of you at lunch, actually. And it's really, I don't know how you did that, Riz, but I know it's part of your spirit, and it's part of the incredible dedication that you had for so much dedication. Lars, there was one time when I went to get coffee in Brooklyn early in the morning, and I was heading into the coffee shop, and I looked to my right, and there's Riz with Jeremy sitting and signing at a table outside the coffee shop, like they did every single morning. And I mean, can you imagine as a director seeing an actor that enmeshed in process and dedication? It just, I couldn't believe it. That's a very special kind of actor. That's a very special kind of human being.
Shut up. Come on, move it on. Thank you. All right, come on. Thank you, guys.
Riz, you can leave the room again for a couple minutes, Riz, if you need to.
I also wanted to say about the deaf community and our experience with the deaf community and the deaf community on screen in the film is that it's just important to note that it really isn't, the film kind of approached the deaf community as asking to be included. Most of everything you see on the screen actually comes from the deaf community. It's not me representing the deaf community. It's not me writing the deaf community. I don't take any credit for the authenticity that you see on the screen. That's the authenticity of the deaf community. As these guys will tell you, you know, Shaheem is doing his thing on screen, you know, all the games the kids are playing, all of that stuff came from the actors, came from the deaf community. And so the film actually acts, you know, it's a hearing person merging into the deaf community, getting invited in and then leaving. And that's how the film acts too. It doesn't look to speak for the deaf community or represent the deaf community. It visits.
Well, there's some beautiful moments. The time on the playground, where Ruben and the child are doing the thing on the slide, and I mean, some of those moments look like they could be just things that unfolded those particular shooting days. It's beautiful. Tell me about the sound design. Obviously, has a very, very different feel to it than any other movie that we've ever seen. Was that always your intention, or is that something that you came to in the post process?
No, you really couldn't do that later. You know, that was a very intentional experience, and that's putting it mildly. The sound design on this film actually started a couple years before the film was shot, and it involved a huge amount of experimentation about putting mics in skulls and underwater and doing all sorts of crazy things with sound. And my sound designer, Nicolas Becker, and I spent a lot of time. We went into like soundless places, like specific museums in Paris where they have soundless rooms. And we really took a deep dive on sound on this. And then we did a 23-week sound mix after in post.
23 weeks. Okay.
23-week sound mix, and that doesn't include the time on set, as Riz can tell you, with miking Riz's eyelids. And no, this was not something you just do in post. This was a very intentional sonic experience that we went after.
Did you know from the beginning when you were writing it that you wanted the sound design to have this particular feel to it? Because obviously, as far as I know, it's unprecedented in film, at least in modern film, right?
Well, I was one of those obnoxious directors that said things like, I want to create something you've never heard before. And everyone goes, yeah, great. But it really was what I was hoping to do. And, I know I talked a lot to Riz about that sound was going to be
I just want to jump in here just to let you know. So, usually after a scene is shot in a film, so the sound recordist will come in and they'll say, let's do a wild track, which means let's say all the lines again, just record the audio. On this film, after a scene was done, Nicola would come up to me with a kind of dodecahedron kind of 3D sound rig kind of object and put it against my chest and ask me to breathe. And then asked me to swallow. Now he said, now blink. Now move your tongue around on the inside of your teeth. Now lick your lips. It was crazy. He just kind of ended up recording all of almost the kind of the internal inner soundscape of the
authentic feel of
your world when his hearing starts to be lost.
That's crazy. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but this may be, I haven't dived deep on this, but this may be the first movie that has subtitles in the same language as the dialogue. I don't know if there are others, but what made you, was that, where in the decision process did that come up? Was that also something you had envisioned years out, or was that a later decision?
That was an interesting realization that I had. My grandmother was a cinephile, and when she went deaf, she lost film, and she lost the ability to watch films. And at that time, very few things were captioned. And she wrote hundreds, if not thousands, of letters for the rest of her life, lobbying to get films open captioned.
Really? Wow. Okay.
And so I have to say, it's not that I began the process thinking about that. I think there's a lot of interesting serendipity that brought these things together and brought me to this project. But at one moment, I realized this film, I cannot show this film without open captioning. I can't do it. And I think it's really interesting to look back at that moment and to realize that almost everyone said, you're crazy, you can't do that. Because like you said, it's the same language. So it's a tricky thing.
Right. It's very tricky. Sometimes you sit there and it's like, I don't know, like a train spotting or something, right? Where, somebody's sitting there going, can these audiences really understand what they're saying, with these thick Scottish accents or what have you, right?
Exactly.
But it always feels a little off or whatever, but this felt like it's so authentic and so just part of the world that you're presenting. But it's interesting to think about your grandma.
Yeah, it really had to happen. And if you think about it, the deaf community is really ignored in this way, in the sense that, so many theaters, if they don't have closed captions, the deaf community is just simply not invited. So can you imagine, I mean, it's so many people, it's millions of people, and this entire world of cinema is just closed off. So can you imagine having the audacity to make this film and to then not have it be open captioned? It would be the biggest fuck you ever. Right. And so this wasn't a question at one point. And it became very intentional at a certain moment, but it was a fight because a lot of people wondered, will the film sell? Will anyone want to screen it? And those were real questions, I mean, they were real questions.
One thing that I think we circled this before, but the authenticity on so many fronts is remarkable. And like I said, I sometimes and others kind of make a sport out of finding things that are not real. But it seems in three worlds, in the music world, in the recovery world, and in the deaf world, that you're going into details that are so spot on, and which Hollywood often portray very hokey, fake. But I mean, the sense of detail, especially in even the recovery world, the language, the interaction, with the counselor and so on. It just seems so real. Was that a part of the mission? Was to really capture the authenticity for you in all these different little worlds that are part of the bigger picture of the film?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if we're not in this for authenticity. I don't know what we're doing. I mean, this is essential. And, like you were mentioning, Paul, who played Joe in the film, he's a two-time Vietnam veteran himself. Do you know that he's actually plays in a metal band as well?
There's nothing that surprises me anymore.
Plays in a metal band, but he's a two-time veteran of Vietnam. He's taught AA group.
So when he's talking about coming back from Vietnam and drinking beer and all the rest of the stuff that about his reintegration, it's all authentic, basically, even just as an actor to his character.
It's authentic in a way that is hard to even beyond that. There's a scene in which, when Ruben is hammering in the morning at one time, and he brings him into the office and he says, you don't have to do, he was bringing Vietnam into the room on that day in a way that you could never do if you hadn't been there. It was something that, what I'm always looking for as a director is for every scene to be bigger than me. If it's confined to me, which can't possibly be authentic, I haven't done those things. It has to be bigger than me. It has to show me something I didn't know. It has to show me a life I'm not aware of. And that's when I get really excited, while making something. And, I'm sure you understand that. Any creator understands those moments when something's bigger than them. And, that's what I found with you guys, with Chelsea and Shaheem, and the specificity that Riz brought to this that was way beyond me. And that's when you just go, man, that's when you feel like you're making something that's magic. But you have to be willing to trust in that, and to foster it and to work for it. and certainly.
On a separate note, this film premiered in Toronto, 13, 14 months ago. And now we're sitting promoting it on Zoom, doing Q&As via Zoom. So you've had, I guess, your feet in both worlds on this, all of you guys. Film festivals pre and post COVID, and your movie is coming out in these challenging times. Playing in theaters, if there are any theaters that will be open in November and December, and then VOD. Talk a little bit about just how, starting in Toronto a year later, now we're sitting here, the movie's coming out to VOD and people will finally get to see it. Where are your emotional? Are you bummed that it's not going to sort of get a proper and old style theatrical run? Are you just excited for people to see it? What the difference is between obviously doing, the Torontos of the world and sitting here and Zooming for the Mill Valley Festival? All four of you, maybe give me a couple thoughts on that.
Chelsea, Shaheem, do you want to jump in first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Really, all of this is new for me. And the Toronto experience was overwhelming, mind-blowing, just having the experience of being in person, seeing the audience there. And that's the expectation that I had from there on out. And I'm grateful and feeling fortunate that we can do this in a safe manner. And I'm pretty stoked that Amazon is going to be putting this out. I'm so curious to see what people think. It would be lovely to see them in person. And we also have the luxury of technology so we can see how folks feel about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Anybody?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to love it. I heard a lot of positive things about it. They say it's inspirational. And they said they want to see the movie, but I haven't seen it yet. But I feel it's going to be good. So I heard a lot of positive things about it. So a lot of deaf people will go if they have caption too at a movie theater. That's one thing too. I agree with Chilton too. So, yeah.
That's great.
What's it like for you, Darius? Obviously, I have a much deeper sense of your commitment and your engagement in this for sounds like forever. Are you happy to finally share it with the world? Is there nothing but joy? Is it, wow, these are crazy times, but it's great to get it out there? I mean, just tell me where your head's at.
Well, no, it's a bummer in certain ways. Yeah, I mean, I think that we've all. I don't think it's worth sugarcoating the fact that we're all making sacrifices right now. I know that you're not touring. You're missing a live audience, and all of your fans are missing that. And
I appreciate your honesty on that. I mean, we put a record out 3 months ago in August that was supposed to come out around a whole tour in April and May, and it was weird as fuck. But I think it's great that I applaud your honesty and that we can have this conversation about how it is okay to feel a little bummed. And obviously we have to be careful as artists. There are people that are so much more challenged than we have been and that have ended up in these devastating situations. But the amount of work that you've put into this over the years, I mean, it must be hard to not have it come out in the way that at least you expected it to come out, right?
It is. And, much of the arts and what we do is about human connection. And this is connection on one level, but it's not on another. And, it's not the same as being in a room. And this film, it was shot on 35 millimeter. It has a sound experience that you can only experience in a theater. And so I would be, I'm not going to bullshit. I'm definitely sad that it won't necessarily have that cinematic run that it might have had, and that we're having virtual festivals right now, and that's part of the sacrifice that this film is going through at this time when so many people are sacrificing. And it's something that I think about daily and am really aware of. And it does feel like a loss, but it also, I can say all those other things about how fortunate we are. And I do feel those also, and certainly fortunate to have a distributor that has, last time I checked, a fairly big online presence.
That they do indeed, yeah. Two last questions. And I think you've already kind of answered it, but I mean, do you see this movie, obviously it's going to have legs for quite some time with people that discover it, but do you see it potentially at some point almost turning into like a PSA for the deaf community in the future? Either of you?
I wouldn't say that.
No, I don't think anyone can speak for the deaf community, let alone this film. And I'll let, Chelsea and Shaheem kind of jump in there. But I do hope that for some hearing people, it might be introduce them to the richness of deaf culture, the diversity of deaf culture, and the way it introduced me to that. So I hope it may be an opening for some people into seeing outside of their immediate circle. But I mean, I don't know if Chelsea, Shaheem, if you've got anything to add there about what you hope this might communicate about the deaf community or how it might build bridges. I don't know.
Sure, I'd love to. I think what this film...
Each one is deaf and then, hey, community come together. That's what I thought.
Yeah, like what Shaheem was saying. And I think for hearing folks who...
Together, you see deaf communicate, hearing communicate, come together. That's how build the gap between the deaf and the hearing community.
Yeah, hopefully.
Chelsea, go.
Thanks, Darius. I think this film for hearing people who have never, ever met a deaf person, oftentimes people think of deaf community members as individuals, and it's one instance that they maybe meet somebody in a coffee shop or on the street or what have you. And this is very different. What's very common in the world is hearing loss. And oftentimes it's a taboo subject. People don't want to talk about it. And they often apologize when they meet a deaf person. Oh, I'm sorry you're deaf. I'm sorry you've lost your hearing and whatnot. What this does is it amplifies what marginalization does to an individual and what an invitation does to somebody within a community that has its own culture and language. So I think this is more of a PSA for hearing people, Lars. And it's really something to expose hearing people to say, deaf people are pretty badass too, And
obviously that's where I was going with that. I mean, it just seems, I've seen the movie twice in the last 2 weeks, and the world that it's opening us up to, and the few other people that I've talked to have seen the film feel the same way. You just walk away with such a better understanding of a world that we've never seen on film, and a world that we don't spend a lot of time in. So I think it's incredibly educational from that sense.
It is. I appreciate that, Lars. And just to add to that, somebody had mentioned the captioning and the subtitles, and a lot of times people who can hear are annoyed by it. They say it's distracting and it blocks out their access and whatnot. And it's so incredible to see a movie that is accessible. Oftentimes we have access after the fact, especially today in this world that we're living. Access is it's a necessity in order for us to be safe. So this sets the tone for other movies. So regardless if a deaf person is involved or not, captions should be there for so many reasons. For folks who are second, third, fourth language users, for folks who have auditory processing disorders, for folks who are deaf, for so many reasons. And this just allows for access at all levels.
That's great.
Well, I feel like the world's going to be awake and learn to educate of the deaf community. They will see why, after watching the movie, they will see and understand how we feel. Our struggle, we still don't give up, and we keep pushing. Show them never give up.
Well, thanks for putting that out there. For people that walk away from this film, obviously fans of the film and the experience that just had, can any of you share anything that you're working on or anything that's coming next? Riz, you got a couple things in the pipeline? Anything coming out soon?
Yeah, I have another movie coming out in the UK currently. It's called Mogul Mowgli, which is a kind of personal piece that I co-wrote, and it's connected to my album, The Long Goodbye.
Wow.
But that's the US release for that is some point next year, pending the reopening of theaters or not. But yeah, I mean, I think my focus right now, I think all of ours is very much on this and how this still moves the world, because we've all put a lot of heart. It has a lot of heart, and we put a lot of ourselves into it, and so we're really excited for people to connect with it.
Darius, do you know where you're going next? Are you still waiting for this to?
I'm writing another rom-com. Another one. With some more.
Okay, well, keep them coming. Okay, all right.
I'm working on
Thank you.
I'm working on a very kind of deep, tough film right now, but something I'm really obsessing over. So it's nice to talk to actual humans after being in my brain all day. It's a tough place to be, but yeah.
I can only imagine if the place beyond the pines and the sound of metal occupy a lot of your time. It must be liberating to get it out of occasionally. Get out of that. Well, thank you everybody for joining.
Lars, man, thank you. What a pleasure. What a privilege.
Yeah, thank you, Lars. Absolute, couldn't believe. Yeah, when I found out you were doing this, I was like, what?
And Lars, I know that maybe next time I think we're doing another Q&A with you, even maybe. And I know that you, even within the band, have gone through stuff that really parallels stuff in this story, with Hetfield and, and so interesting.
Well, definitely. I mean, obviously, all of these, we've all had small issues with hearing and tinnitus and ringing in ears, and find myself, waking up in the middle of the night on tour and going over to turn a television off that's never even on, in the middle of sleep, and crazy things like that. And you just never think about any of this stuff when you're full of spunk and in your 20s and just want to take on the world. And so you get kids and you family, and you want to engage, and you start being protective and think, the long game and all that type of stuff. But obviously also with recovery, and a lot of people close to me have been through some pretty dark things. And so this film really speaks to me on just so many levels. And if you want me to scream from the rooftops about the film at any point on socials or whatever, I'm happy to do it.
Oh man, we would be so honored, just so honored.
Thank you so much.
I would listen to a lot of Metallica writing this film, my brother and I both. So it's hard not to be.
What an honor. Thank you.
And my brother, I was talking to my son, who's also a drummer, and it was just before we got on, and I was like, "Hey, Lars is doing the Q&A." He's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know." So anyway, man, it's such an honor, such an honor.
Well, right back at you, right back at all you guys, Chelsea and Jaheim and everybody. Riz, thank you for joining.
Likewise.
Let me know if we can help in any other way, shape, or form. And my best to Derek, and much love from San Francisco.
Much love.
Much love. Bye, guys. Bye.
Yeah.
See you.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Lars. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody, thank you.